Welcome to your Farm and Home Show. My name is Joanna Coles, and today we're visiting with Dr. Grant Gardner. He's with the University of Kentucky as grain extension marketing specialist there. We're going to talk about something I think that are on a lot of people's minds, especially grain producers, and that's the post-harvest outlook.
We're looking at corn and soybeans. And really, the big problem here is that prices are really low and input prices have been really high, in the recent past. And so, on the input price side, we came through COVID and had some supply chain disruptions. Fertilizer, especially, shot through the roof. And so, post COVID, we've came into a time where I guess during that time as well, crop prices were high. And so post COVID, we've come out of a time where we had supply chain disruptions, had excess need for grains in other countries. And since then, we've watched the crop price drop off. While fertilizers have lowered some, they've stayed more elevated. And so really the difference between that input price and that crop price aren't leading to profitability really at the current moment. And so if we were looking at prices in general, typically, right now, if I look around the state, you're looking at a corn price somewhere around $4 and a soybean price somewhere around $10 per bushel.
That's not even break even.
And so typically what I advise people is that you want to sell between the months of February and June. And so you're better to book those prices outside of harvest because at harvest, when all that supply comes in, that's when we experience our lowest prices. And so making sure that you book some forward sales or forward contracts, possibly hedge with futures or locked in some higher prices outside of that delivery period. And I think that's really important.
Our farmers are so efficient at producing crops because we do have less land and they've mastered that. However, we just don't have those places. Some of the trade deals have not been conducive, but we really need to increase demand.
And so, as we look throughout not just the nation, but the entire world right now, you've seen large expansion of acreage, particularly in Brazil. They're expanding acreage by about 4% per year. And so, if we look at their yields, they're much lower than what you would see throughout the United States. But the fact that they can just keep adding acreage and acreage adds to that supply. Other countries can go obtain grain from Brazil for cheaper than what they can get it from the United States. And so, that's really made us fall off from being competitive in exports, not just even excluding the trade deals. I think that, we just have a lot of supply throughout the world right now. One of the big things we can pick up on is domestic demand. And so we're seeing some positives there. We're seeing pushes from biofuel policy in both ethanol, biodiesel, and hopefully long-term sustainable aviation fuel. We're seeing expansion in specifically crush processing for soybeans. And so can we crush those beans? You're going to create two products. You're going to get soybean oil, which is used for cooking, as well as a lot of it goes to biodiesel or other types of fuels. And then obviously you're also going to get the meal, which is going to go to mostly feed use.
Absolutely. And so if we can increase that domestically, that's certainly going to help our farmers at home.
We need some sort of combination on can we pick up some of those exports we've lost from other countries? And then when can we continue to see expansion within domestic use?
For grain farmers moving forward into the next year where the markets do not look promising, we're really going to have to look at profitability and margins and cutting cost where we can and kind of reducing from that end.
Yeah, and that's really hard to do because if you think about cutting anything out of the input side of the balance sheet, you're taking on more risk. Do you cut if you cut fertilizer, you're probably looking at less yield. And so what's the balance there? If you cut some spring applications, what's the risk of insect infestation? What's the risk of disease? And so from the financial standpoint, I think these cuts have to be made. That said, you're also worried about, well, where am I going to come out on the other side when we come around, not just through this harvest, but through planting and harvest next year? And with the such large production that we're expecting this year, I think elevators are very worried about will we be able to actually hold all this grain? And so the idea is they're paying a little bit of premium at the river to make sure that they can load that barge a day and get it out before we could possibly have those issues again. The other comes around to the fact that we do have high expected production, but we have missed some reports since then. And I think, weather has deteriorated. And so I think people have questions over how much yield are we actually going to have. And so they're trying to source that grain to the best of their ability with at least the information that's out there.
All right. Well, we certainly appreciate you sharing your information today. And if you have any questions, make sure to contact your local extension office. We appreciate you watching the Farm and Home Show and hope you have a great day.